right, let's go, buddy.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
We are, of course, going over the draft changes to the sign ordinance. The purpose of the amendments are to update the sign standards. We're providing clarification regarding permit processes and addressing concerns that we've received over the last several months. The important thing to point out is that we're not proposing any major changes to the sign ordinance as far as what you're allowed, what you're not allowed. These are primarily clarifications to address issues that were not previously addressed. The slide shows video display billboards. They aren't addressed in our current ordinance. It shows an example of a commercial wayfinding sign that's also not addressed. So really these rounds of amendments are really to address things that were not previously addressed. The first thing we're doing, we've added a number of definitions beginning on page 2 of your draft ordinance. And I won't go through each of the definitions, but we'll touch on them as we go through the regulations. But these are just, these are a listing of the definitions that we added to our code. Under general provisions, the first item we've added is a clarification. It clarifies the requirements for a development permit application and building permits as determined by size and height of signs. And again, if you're following in the ordinance, it's page 5, subsection C. We've added provisions to establish minimum information necessary to obtain a sign permit. Next, we've just done another clarification of setbacks for all signs. Fourthly, we added under prohibited signs, we added a section under prohibited signs and sign holders. That's a definition, one of the definitions that we added. Another definition and regulations that we established are for portable signs. We are prohibiting these signs from being placed in the required setbacks, landscape buffer, public right-of-way, or site distance triangles. And we've added provisions for variances and appeals procedures.
That site distance only applies to like county roads, I assume, state roads? That's a pretty, is that 25-foot triangle? Is that what the dimension is?
I think it's 25 feet. There is the definition that we've had long established in our code, and it applies to all roads.
But it wouldn't apply to like your driveway, for example, coming out of your business onto the road. Not that site distance triangle, right? Only the intersections of public right-of-ways?
I'll have to look at that definition if it would apply to driveways. Do you know, Summer?
It actually prohibits like buffers like hedges, fences, and signage, things like that, from being within that site distance triangle at any intersection.
But that doesn't apply to your driveway in?
No, that should not. Your driveway should be, you know, like a flat surface there, you know, on grade, so that shouldn't prohibit your line of sight vision from being able to see. If, say, if you have a sign or a tree there, it may prohibit you from being able to see around it to make your exit from that driveway.
This doesn't address that at all?
No. It just prohibits the signs from being within that site distance triangle.
So it would be possible for somebody that lived on a corner lot to not be able to put a sign in the corner of their property?
With it would have to be set back sufficient enough to be outside that site distance triangle, so it wouldn't obstruct your view from exiting that driveway.
I want to ask a question about the portable signs as well. You know, are you talking about like just the 18 by 24 signs that can just stick there? Say if a business wanted to advertise they were selling hot dogs or whatever, they were open, and they set a series. And they set a series of those 18 by 24 signs up just to make people aware that they're open or that they're selling hot dogs or boiled peanuts, or if they're having an event that day. How does that fall up underneath the sign ordinance with a business or event trying to advertise themselves?
Those would be addressed under temporary signage, and so they would have, there's limited standards for that. So say you're having a grand opening or a sale event at an existing facility, they could post those for up to 30 days. And then they would have to be removed before being replaced with another similar temporary sign.
don't think anybody feels, I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
but you know what I mean. I'm just,
Not supposed to be selling peanuts here anyways.
right. Well, I'm just not wanting to inhibit someone's ability to advertise their business or their event.
It'll cost people $30.
Yeah, that's, I've added some pictures, some examples of some portable signs, and they're really the type that are meant to be towed or moved around. And these are the ones that, I guess the issue is that they're being placed in the right-of-way, in landscaping buffers, and they are a safety issue.
And that's what I think we all have to be on the page if we're going to look at inhibiting someone to make a living or attract customers versus safety.
Right.
I think we have to be safety first
I agree.
and then look at what they're allowed to do. Okay.
So again, I just put up some examples there of some of the portable signs that were not previously addressed in the code, and perhaps illustrating what some of the issues with these are.
What are the issues?
That they are often placed in the right-of-way, often placed in landscaping, often placed where they could be a hazard. And it's not just safety, it is a visual issue as well.
You have one sort of problem, or whatever you want to say. You've got an individual sign, a business sign, and then you have a sign for charitable organizations. We do differentiate between the two. Let's just say that up at CVS, once a year they have the Christmas tree sign for the Boy, the rolling sign, Christmas trees for Boy Scouts. Is that treated any different than anybody else putting up a rolling sign?
I think we put that under exemption, didn't we?
Yeah, they are treated. It doesn't depend on the type of business, whether non-profit or for-profit. It's really treated
Pretty much the same.
the same, yes. And the intent is that these are not to be permanent because they're a safety issue for hurricanes, but they also tend to degrade, and typically people don't get permits for these, and they become permanent signage.
Political signs, how do we change that anyway? Is that
Those are addressed in the sign ordinance. There are no changes proposed, except,
Not supposed to be right way either.
well, I guess we can get to that, but I'll see. I don't think there weren't any major changes to political signs.
But you're going to get there.
Yeah, we're going to go through, I guess, section by section, and again, there weren't major changes, so a lot of this we'll just skim over, and then you can ask me questions. Feel free to stop me on any of these sections. And I'll be relying on Summer and Melissa quite a bit here, familiar with the existing sign ordinance. On-premises signs, starting on the bottom of page 7, we have a clarification regarding the zoning districts in which these signs may be placed. Maximum square footage requirements remain the same for on-premise freestanding signs and on-premise multi-tenant signs. Multi-tenant signs were one of the definitions that we added to address the types of signs shown in the picture. Allowance for signage on residential properties which have been approved for non-residential conditional uses such as a church. Again, these were not under that bullet point. Those were not previously addressed in the code, although in residential districts you can have uses like churches as well as home-based businesses, so we address signage for those uses. But again, no major changes to your on-premise sign regulations. We've added allowances for signage on residential properties. That's what I mentioned about the home occupations. And limited standards to allow construction of subdivision or community signs. That's for the example in the picture. Those were not previously addressed in the sign ordinance, so we've added a requirement on that, or some standards on those. Off-premise signs, beginning on page 9, also known as billboards. That's really what we're discussing here. We've added some clarification regarding the zoning districts. updated annual permit fees based on existing off-premise language. No changes were made to any of the spacing requirements. There's an item there under temporary signs section. That's really not under off-premise signs, but then again, that's another section beginning on page 10, section F, temporary signage. And this may address a lot of the issues you were talking about, the real estate signage and those sorts of signs. Commercial wayfinding sign. This was something that we saw as a need for a new type of signage, and this would allow for commercial signage to provide directions from the main highways to local businesses that don't have frontage on the main highways. So it establishes some minimum size requirements, and these would be they would have to lease property from the owner who has the frontage, but it would be an allowance to allow for uses like the one that's shown there that aren't currently addressed in the code. Currently, there's no provisions for you to have an commercial wayfinding sign except as an off-premise sign.
Question on that one, Louis.
Yes.
Heather, this is the one that has to be zone commercial to have this?
Or industrial, or PUD designated for commercial.
And my question was, we're fixing to have a heritage center. A lot of this applies to Jack's place too. We're fixing to have a heritage center. It's going to be a museum that the historical society wants people to come visit.
Mm-hmm.
Under this wording, there's no way they can put a sign out there saying that here's where it's at, because everything is residential around. Is there any way we can treat cultural, significant cultural attractions different, because they're not directing them to a McDonald's, they're directing them to a museum for
Tourist-based related. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's not addressed in the ordinance that I'd like to address with you all, and I'll get to it at the end of the PowerPoint, is DOT has a program where the county can adopt a resolution and then allow for signage in the right-of-way for these type of uses.
And the sign would be a lot smaller then.
Yes.
And
Those the little brown ones?
You can come up with any color scheme. They can even have a logo, things like that. They're called
historical
tourist
market type
oriented.
things, or like you say, wayfinding, so that there's a point of interest. Here it is.
That's right.
I think it's very important to get to places like Jack's got and the museums and those things. I think it's very important.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think I would recommend keeping this commercial wayfinding like we have it to address those. These are primarily commercial uses in Panacea and Crawfordville and places like that, but other profit and non-profit organizations could take advantage of the DOT program, and I'll touch on that a couple slides down. But it wouldn't be addressed in the sign ordinance, but it would be something that if the board wanted to, we could pursue further. And we've had discussions with DOT on that.
I'd be interested when we do go to talk to that, like who pays for that, all that kind of thing.
Okay, sure.
Well, I checked on those brown signs one time before, and that was something that the Department of State used to do, but they had a program that they did that, but they don't do it anymore. So you can still get a brown sign, but you'll have to have it made yourself.
Okay. Oh, and the commercial wayfinding, these are fairly small scale, 32 square feet maximum and 6 feet in height. So, just to clarify.
Well, you'll probably get to that, but how does that apply to 98 and the scenic byway?
You could have these on the scenic byway, as I understand it. They just have to be on commercial property. What's not allowed on the scenic byway are off-premise signs, the billboards type of signs. So we're treating these a little different. They have their own special classification. Let's see, non-conforming signs. We have not made any changes to that section from what currently exists. We've added some prohibited signs on page 13, and we've provided some examples there of some prohibited signs.
Well, why are we prohibiting electronic signs?
Well, what we've proposed is we're prohibiting the video display billboards, off-premise video display
Why?
billboard. That was just something that we proposed, and if the board would like to change it, I mean, there's no,
That's the direction that the whole billboard industry itself is going, just more electronic. They can put 40 to 50 on that one thing, and it's just, you know, that I see as time goes on, they'll probably switch more and more of their billboards out with the electronic ones.
And that would be great, but if we go and allow them to do this now, then we won't have any leverage to do what other communities have done by saying for every one of these display signs that you're putting up there, which has more of an impact and more of a distraction to the driver, that for every one of these you put out, you're going to take down X number of regular billboards. Because there was, at one time in this community, a large push to try to limit the amount of those billboards out there. So other communities have used that as a leverage point to bargain, so to speak, and they actually set it into the rule, a set formula.
I don't know how or go to go, but do those communities have the 1,000-foot separation that we have? Do we have 1,000 feet between signs? It's pretty rigid, I think.
I think it's larger than that. Yeah, it's 2,500.
It's correct, but you know, it's an interesting thing. Some years back, members of the chamber had gone, I won't mention their names, had gone on a vacation, and they were all enthused coming back saying they had driven for X number of miles through this one county and not seen one billboard, how refreshing that was. And, you know, we've seen them pop up like dandelions here for a specific period of time. So I think that, you know, I'm not saying that I have no idea what the overwhelming will of the county is right now or the board, but it is something to consider of not giving it away right now and to possibly see where we want to go with
Some
it.
language then, instead of just saying you can't do them, you can't do them unless specifically approved by the board, that would still give us
No, I think,
negotiating points.
I would like to speak on that issue also. I was talking to someone today. I came from a little county in the mountains. Of course, it's nothing prettier than the mountains. Coming out of Georgia County into North Carolina County, we have a nest of billboards. In a quarter of a mile, we got, I'm going to just exaggerate, but we have 30 billboards in a quarter of a mile as you come from one state to the next. And it's really a mess. I'm gonna suggest that if a company, your digital billboards, I think it's maybe 6 to 10 seconds, and you change the copy. So you can run in a 60, in a 1 minute, you can run 6 ads, and that's on both sides of that board. I'm going to say, and if it's legal, it's legal. I hope we can do it if it's legal. If you put up a digital billboard, you take down 6 of your other boards on the same street. And let's use...
What if you don't have 6, though? Just running it out.
Okay, all right, if you don't have...
You don't have any.
Okay, if you don't have any, if you want to put up a billboard, you can put up 1 digital. That any particular company can only have 1 digital. If you're a company that's got a string of, let's say you've got 12 billboards coming down 319 in Wakulla County, then basically, for every digital you put up, you take down 6 of your regular. So you can really have two digital.
was that?
That's what you were saying.
Yeah, the thing is once you start allowing it without having set rules in there, I can picture, not that someone would be sneaky, but I can picture someone going over to one of the billboard companies that has a whole bunch of them, say, what's your value on that? Offering 4 times the value for it, buy 1, now he only has 1 in the county, and he gives up that 1 for a digital. I like where Commissioner Moore's thinking is going, but I hesitate to put it into our ordinance right now.
How would you address the analog ones that have triangle thing they flip? Do you see
Pretty much same thing. If it's electronic, let's put it another way, and this can be worked. If it's electronically controlled, without a guy up there painting it, that if they've got,
you know what I'm saying? You can get one that just flips and has 3.
if company A has 12, they can take, for every digital they put up, they can take down 6. They're still going to be able to receive the same amount of income.
Now, just, we do have the ones that change, that rotate panels in the county. We treat those like any other billboard. They're not treated specially.
I would treat that the same way. If you're not up there with paintbrush painting it, it's remote control. So, but if Richard wants to put up a billboard, Richard can put up a billboard. He could put up a digital billboard with board permission.
But if I had 5 or 6 others, I'd have to remove them for the digital.
6 others. Now, you can't...
That ratio is pretty tough.
Well, let it be tough.
That's pretty...
If it's legal, let it be tough.
That's...
Because I know it's tough, David.
That's what I'm saying. Is we got to have something that's realistic.
All right, Jerry, what's to stop, just going along your train of thought, what's to stop, let's say Lamar Advertising wants to, they get rid of this billboard. What's to stop them from selling that property right back to some upstart? Richard starts his own sign company, he puts a billboard right back up there, they just sell it to him.
Well, there's, you probably can't do that. It keeps Lamar, let's say this, it keeps Lamar from owning 40 billboards and nobody else, because they will put them up to dominate the market. They'll put them up where they don't have them leased or not. It's called market penetration. So you can't stop,
I would go as far as say 8 out of every 10 of billboards in the county we have probably do belong to Lamar.
Well, they're very. It's all over the country. They're a large company, and they dominate, and they buy. I've got a friend in Atlanta that he may have had 200 billboards, and he sold them to Lamar, and he came back and put up 200 more, and he sold those to Lamar.
Okay, the only other thing that I can think of is, okay, so if you had the electronic billboard, well, his other 6, he's got a 6th one 2 miles down the road, well, that one just happens to be a quarter mile in front of somebody's business. Well, somebody rents that one so somebody can clue into their business it's a quarter mile up the road, but if he has to take that one down, now there's not another sign around except a couple miles up the road wayfinding to that business.
They can still do a separate wayfinding sign, it just wouldn't be
that business can have its own individual sign.
Yes.
I mean, there's all kind of variables is what I'm trying to say,
But if you go off of that, I understand what David's saying, but I don't like them either. I really don't like them. They're a necessary evil.
Well, I was just saying, instead of 6, maybe it's I know we're not talking specific here, but maybe 3 to every one, or
I understand
something along those lines.
I understand that, but he will still be getting the same revenue or more.
Right.
One digital, revenue-wise, will more than cover 6 that are standing there on the side of the road.
Because there's 2 trains of thought on the professional billboards like Lamar. Is the good thing about having Lamar is you've got an entity that you can go to. If their sign falls down, they're in it. But you could have some of these other billboards that we got to put up by individuals that stay there forever, and we end up having to take them down, etc. So I mean, you gotta, you cut those big guys out. Sometimes you're hurting your own self into a degree.
I just don't like the big guys, really and truly. I don't like the big guys dominating my market.
I agree. I'm just saying, I'm just pointing that out.
I don't like somebody from New York dominating my market.
Right.
I just don't like that. And if we had 100 billboards in the county and we had 20 companies, each of them having 5, I'd be a whole lot happier than one company. Because when they dominate your market, they decide what you're going to pay for that product. You lose your competitive as an owner.
Right.
You lose your competitive.
Well, I hope this is all crystal clear to you.
Well,
maybe you could come back with some suggestions, maybe not specifics, but just something we could put in the ordinance where in the future, it wouldn't disallow these negotiations. You know what I mean?
Well, we've received some input on this from the public, and I think some of the speakers here tonight might have some input on that. But again, for now, they were just put in there as not allowed, and it was really just doesn't fit in with the character of the community.
I have one more question. Like
Sure.
the sign that you've got there on the left, say if someone puts a sign like that, they own the property, they own the tree, and they put the sign. Is there, I mean, is their sign on their tree on their property? Is that prohibited?
Well,
It's not in the right of, it's not in the right of way, but
One
it's,
of the better things, Richard.
yeah.
well, we wouldn't issue a permit for anything like that, of course, but, and there are free speech issues, but, yeah, technically, that is a snipe sign.
Because it's a business sign.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's right.
Now, back on the digital, just real quickly, I mean, if we're gonna, I would either prefer to see them addressed the way they are in the ordinance now, or addressed with a full set of standards. I would not recommend saying, well, or negotiate it on a case-by-case basis, because that's really how you get into trouble with individual applicants who think they've been treated unfairly, or any of those other types of particular complaints. So if there is, the will of the board is to allow digital signs, or allow certain types of digital signs, or allow digital signs in trade, I think we should fully flesh out those requirements before we bring the ordinance back.
I'll say one other thing, if I may. Let's just say that Lamar had 12 billboards. They can convert those 12 to 2 digital, in my opinion. And then that's all I want, if the law allows it, that's all I want them to have on 319. Now, on Woodville Highway, they can have another 12, if whatever. They can have 12 off-premise regular, or they can have 2 digital. I just don't want to see a company dominate the market and to the exclusion of everybody else. Olympus, we had Lamar, and then Olympus built about 10 signs here in the county. 60 days later, I'm exaggerating, they sold them to Lamar.
Could we put a section in there just addressing electronic billboards and then just put reserved in it, just to get everything else going we want to, and then we can work on the electronic billboard?
Well, couldn't we just leave them prohibited and then amend that section of the ordinance
Yeah,
and
that
bring
sounds
back
fine.
standards?
Maybe
That's not a problem. I guess
This
you
would
take
be
it on one
expensive
by
to
one.
flush out though, as
I
far as the
don't
cost.
have a problem with that.
But I understand.
I think we need to do more research on it to find out what other communities are doing.
Good.
I guess just leave it as prohibited now.
Yep.
I don't personally have a problem with them.
All right. Let's see, we've added exemptions for no trespassing signs in the exemption section, and then under violations and enforcement, minor modifications were made, but no major changes. These are digital display signs. These were signs that they're not, again, I'm differentiating between a digital billboard, which is an off-premise sign. These are signs that we commonly have throughout the county, and frankly, until we started going through the sign ordinance, I really never noticed them a lot. But these were signs that at one of the meetings we had at some point, someone suggested that these not be prohibited, or these not be allowed in the Crawfordville area. But we have not made that change, so these are still treated like regular signage. There's no special regulations with these sorts of signs, and they are different than the digital display billboards that we're talking about. So, unless the board feels differently, that's what is in the ordinance. Community input. These are just some of the comments that we've received so far, and I'm sure you might hear some of these this afternoon, but there's one of the comments was consider an exemption for off-premise signage for nonprofit organizations. Again, that's something we're not addressing, but it's something we don't recommend at this point, and we can discuss this further if we get that comment. There's a consideration of a cap and replace restriction this would be for billboards, where you cap the maximum number of billboards in the county, and then you replace any new billboards that go in have to replace an existing billboard. We're not recommending this because I think our off-premise billboard regulations are pretty restrictive right now. So there's really not a lot of places where you can add new billboards, but This is something that you could consider, but we're not recommending. Consider higher permit fees for off-premise signs, another comment. One of the ones that I think we touched on is consider incentive-based removal of existing billboards to upgrade to existing billboards to digital displays, so just what you were discussing. And then, again, consider a maximum number of total allowed billboards within the county. I asked the question, and we did some research, and there's 32 billboards in the county, and interestingly enough, only one meets the current setbacks and regulations. So
Really?
there's really one conforming billboard in the county.
What is that?
I'm not sure which one it is.
It's the one by Petty's,
And that's not to say that you couldn't add more billboards.
where Petty's used to be. That's now the small engine shop, across from Beef O'Brady's.
3Y?
Yes, 3Y, thank you.
And it's not to say you couldn't add more billboards, but really that's really the only one that meets the regulations. So we have some pretty stringent separation requirements from other signs and from residential zoning districts and from parks and national forests. So just for your information.
I can take your rules and regulations that you have and strategically place 10 billboards, and no other billboard can come in because churches, schools, and that sort of thing, and distances. You could just very well place 10 new billboards strategically, and nobody else can come in.
I don't think they come in now.
It's difficult. It's very difficult to find.
There hasn't been any billboards in
Just for your information, based on the survey that we did when the original billboard ordinance was adopted in 2005, there were actually, at that time, 2 conforming billboards. One of those has since been removed. The other one, as we said, is at the current location of 3Y. And at that time, which we have not had many other changes in billboards that were existing, there were only one other location that would be available right now for permitting based on the spacing requirements,
Yeah, that's what I said.
unless other existing ones were removed to free up areas.
Now, when you say conforming and non-conforming, they were conforming earlier, but when you put in your new rules and regulations, they become non-conforming, is that right?
They were non-conforming based on the spacing requirements under the 2005 ordinance.
Okay, but prior to that, they were conforming.
That's correct. They're
So you
considered
actually-
legal non-conforming uses.
Actually, you made them non-conforming when you did the 205.
Yes.
When the board adopted that ordinance in 2005, they became non-conforming. Previously, there was no regulations on it.
Just some final notes. These are the tourist-oriented directional signing. Staff has done some initial research, and if the board would like, we could continue to look into this. It looks like a good program. It sort of shows a plain blue sign there, but you can put logos on those and do other things, and I'd be glad to look into this further and get you additional information. But that's not addressed in the sign ordinance. It would be something that would be done through a separate ordinance or resolution coming through the board. The other thing we're not addressing in this ordinance that we've had the question on is the bus shelter signs that are located in the county. Those are handled separately. If the board would like to give some direction on that, it would be outside of the sign ordinance. But we could certainly we've looked into that, and we've had complaints on those before as well.
Speaking to that, you do give a definition of it in there. I thought you had mentioned it in there as well.
Oh, the bus shelter sign?
Well, yeah, I think you have a definition in there of bus stop sign. You're right.
It seems like on the bus sign, that if kids are using it, it stays up. If they're not using it, it comes down.
I like that.
There's a lot of those signs that look like they need to be maintained or they've been abandoned, but they're still there. And those bus signs.
And those are actually in the right of way.
As a business and advertising, and there, like Commissioner Moore says, there's some of them in spots where there's no houses anywhere near them anymore. They've never been used for 15 years or better. I mean, how does that process get those things down? How does that happen?
I'd have to check with the attorney on this, but I think the board had, at some point, had to do a resolution approving those, and then the school board did an agreement to do that. I've checked with the school board, and they've not had any contact with the company, so they're no longer coordinating where buses are stopping. But if the board decided they would want to discontinue this program, I think they would do a resolution to that effect.
But if there's no kids in the rain underneath that sign, then it's evidently not needed.
Yeah. And we can certainly look into that if...
Yeah, so you call your definition as bus stop sign means a bus stop shelter built in such a manner as to advertise an establishment, merchandise, service, or entertainment.
They're included as off-premise signs.
Okay, and then they're included somewhere else. Yeah, the definition appears somewhere else in the off-premise sign. So there was one that recently was removed, and that was where I may be wrong on there's a motor dealership, there's Purple Martin, and there was a bus shelter there that was not being used. I believe there were some initiation by the businesses to remove that, and DOT removed that. We as a county, can we be proactive in that?
Yes, we can. And actually, that was just a matter of us calling the sign company and saying, the businesses want it removed, and they removed it. So we could certainly address others or all of them.
So we take photos of the bus shelters when it's raining and it's time to pick up kids and there's no one there.
Well, yeah, or, it seems that there's some that are obviously not being used, but...
I think if the people, I said people around the community and the surrounding areas, if they said they didn't want it, just relay that. But I couldn't see that whoever that company is giving them that revenue source either. I'm sure they rent it.
They do, and that's one of the reasons. I actually called one time about renting one of those signs, but one of the reasons that they stay abandoned is the company makes you sign a 12-month lease. They won't just rent it to you for a month or two. You've got to sign a 12-month lease for like $100.
The other side of that same story is that if there is a need for a shelter for children, then we should not deny it. Like it's sort of, if there is, we leave it. If there is not, we take it down.
Yeah, and I don't know that the company that's renting those signages really is paying any kind of significant fee for that or not. I think it's part of the deal of them providing shelter for our youth. So, but we can look into that.
There's a bunch of those that look like they're nearly in the right of way anyway. A bunch of those shelters.
You'll go ahead and let citizens speak.
Well, I just wanted, before we can do that. I just wanted to come back to, and after the citizens speak, come back to the election signs.
Okay.
All right.
You don't need to fill out card, Jack. Okay. Go ahead, Jack, if you want to start, get it started. Sure.
Hello, Jerry. Let me talk to the bus thing for just a second. I don't want to do that, but I'm a watcher of signs and situations, and in the last 30-some years, Ann and I saw 2 times of which saw kids in the rain under one of those bus signs. Twice. Wish I'd written the dates, but they were at least a long, long time ago. So
I've never seen it.
I'm with you. Right. So it's not that it never happens, but well, look, if we're talking about safety of children, Gulf Specimen as a nonprofit educational institution has a sort of a unique situation. 3 days ago, we had 3 packed school buses of kindergarten kids from Riverside Elementary School. And we're going to be having more Wakulla schools. But our schools come as far from Alabama. They come from Tallahassee. They come from Quincy. They come from Carabel. They come from this whole region. And I have to tell you that, most of the time they get there. But we have had cases, a number of them over the years, where someone barreling down from Georgia or whatever else goes right past the little signs that we've got, continues right on to the FSU Marine Lab, gets lost, comes around back roads, and schools are on a very tight time basis. and they have to have the kids back at school at such and such times. We have actually had cases, and they're very sad, where the school bus had to turn around, abandon the trip, and go back. Or we've had even rushes where the kids have to roar through the lab in 15 minutes because they were late and they overshot, and they didn't do that. And we've had one case where a bus went down a back road, got stuck, had to be pulled out. I mean, let's put it this way, museums, aquariums, planetariums, if we were lucky to have one, maritime museums, wildlife centers, heritage museums, they need a little extra special help. Yes, in some ways they're like businesses. They normally have people come through, and they have people come through that, have to find a directional sign and get their way to it. But something that's going to be open to the public and is going to have school groups really needs a little bit of an exception. And it certainly needs to be mentioned and not blown off as the I guess the county attorney is looking at. In the existing signed ordinance, there is provisions for nonprofit educational type of organizations to have signs in public park areas and county properties that give information and relate to facilities that are already there. Under the DOT regs that already exist and they allow you 8 square foot signs without permits, just a letter from the landowner, and even then that's sometimes not required, that lets you put up a sign, whether it's a residential area or whatever, a wayfinding directional sign. It says, in our case, Gulf specimen and a picture of a seahorse. Now, we can't really regulate the aesthetics of everybody's signs, and God knows the clutter can look bad, but I'll just say this: we spend a lot of time and money and effort in trying to make signs that are highly compatible with the landscape. And just today, there was a woman from New England that came down and was looking at the place and came by, and we just mentioned the signs, and she said, "I find your signs an asset to the area, something that really helps it and invites people to kind of come down there." We have a small sign. Let's put it this way. First of all, let's discuss the right-of-way. Gulf Specimen is a little unique there. We have been lucky. We have a state lands lease on 2 of our major signs there because we've been paying licenses on those things for 12 years or more. And they knew where these were at. We had it measured. It was on the state lands lease, state lands, and the state had to give us a permit. Okay, I'll give up. So anyway, the bottom line is we're kind of an exception, but we would ask that the Wild Mammal Association and other things that are open to the public be equally accepted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. For starters, I just want to address these signs. From being in the tourist industry, they don't work. When I see those signs like that, I think state parks, they aren't going to catch your eye. You have about 3.5 seconds to catch a person's eye on the side of the road. So as that being a possibility for a sign to get a tourist there, you don't see SeaWorld with that. You don't see Busch Gardens with that. I'm not saying we're that or we need that, but I'm saying that's not an option if you have a tourist-based business or if you want tourism in your community. Now, the other thing I'm going to say is that your sign ordinance currently is more stringent than Tallahassee with 1/5 of the population. We're dying out here. I mean, as a small business owner or nonprofit, whatever, at the end of the day, I got to make my light bill just like everybody else. And it's no different to see the government impeding us and stopping us than it is with the rest of our federal government right now. And it's just sad to see it in my own county. I think y'all should really be here to help our small businesses. This is not helping. You know, you have the billboards. Maybe grandfather them the ability to change out. You don't have to add new billboards, but they should have the right to change out and put in the digitals. It is the way the industry's moving. So don't say they can put in new ones like you're saying, because no one wants to see 50 billboards. Give them the right to fix the existing signs to where they can keep up with the modern industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on, Sheree.
Hi, I'm Cherie Miller, Posey's Dockside Cafe located at Rock Landing Marina. Thank you all for trying to make some changes in the present sign ordinance. As it is right now, we cannot do any type of sign to advertise Posey's Dockside Cafe or Rock Landing Marina because according to the present ordinance, we're too far off the road. So I'm asking y'all to make some changes with directional signage and to help us.
Would this change that, the new ordinance?
Commercial way.
The commercial wayfinding sign would give both Rock Landing and Posey's Dockside the ability to put signage on Highway 98 to direct folks to their business on water.
But not on state right-of-way. This would only address, we'd be on commercial property,
It would
correct?
have to be within a commercial or industrially zoned property, which I believe both of those properties right there at the corner of that intersection are appropriately zoned.
But now, Louis, this option, if we participated in this, would allow these signs within the right-of-way for business.
And they've just put these signs up in St. Joe, and I was through there 2 weeks ago, and I noticed them. But I'd like to see this county to pursue this also, but we also need a directional sign there on that corner of Rock Landing Road and 98.
I wonder,
So,
thinking out loud, if we could propose some sort of standardized Wakulla County cultural sign that has our logo or something on it, I don't know.
I mean, Louis said that,
Thinking out loud.
and you've had discussions with the state, and they allow you to customize them to a certain.
That's right. And I can get you more information.
Okay.
so just thank y'all for your consideration, because we pay taxes and we're down there and no way to get people to us.
This should fix your situation,
Yeah.
I think.
And will we be able to have individual signs, or will Rock Landing have one and we can have one, or how's that going to work?
You could have up to one 32 square foot sign on an individual property. So one, being that there's two, appropriately zoned properties at that intersection, you could have one on each parcel, one for each business, or you could ultimately share 32 square feet on one parcel if you chose to do so.
Rock Landing's a county boat ramp, isn't it?
Yeah, but we're talking about the marina.
There's a commercial marina down there as well. It's privately owned.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak on it?
Alan Reese, 294 Emerald Acres Drive. I think some of my comments have already been addressed. I was going to make mention of putting requirements in back for on-premise signs. And off-premise signs, like real estate signs, should be limited in size and number. There's some parcels that have 3 large signs in front of it, which is just excessive and obtrusive. So there should be restrictions in there on the number of signs in front of a parcel and the size of the sign. But the bulk of my comments are related to the bus shelters. 479-16 Florida statute gives an exception to allow that advertising on those bus shelters on the right-of-way. And it refers to Florida statute 337-408. And there it defines it and gives authority to the county. It says, provided that written authorization has been given by the county government within whose unincorporated limits such benches or transit shelters are installed, municipalities and counties that authorize or have authorized a bench or transit shelter to be installed within the right-of-way limits on any road on the state highway system shall be responsible for ensuring, the county has to be responsible, for ensuring that the bench or transit shelter complies with all applicable laws and rules. Florida Administrative Code Rule 1420 was developed to give criteria to implement Florida Statute 337-408. And in 1420 it deals with bus shelters on the right-of-way. And I'll have to tell you that from the beginning they've been abused because certain criteria is laid out in Rule 1420 that has not been complied with. In 1420, a shelter refers to both public transit shelters and school bus shelters, so it's clear that the school bus shelters are included. And also that it's the county government. DOT at one point in time turned its responsibility over to county to monitor this program because they are on the right-of-way. I'll just give you some of the criteria. A shelter may be erected only at bus stops designated by a public transit agency, at a bus stops designated by the local school board, and identified as having service a minimum of 10 times in a 5-day period. So it's not just rain days. For them to be in compliance, they have to be servicing that shelter 10 times a week. They have to be picking up kids 10 times a week at that shelter. Another one, shelters erected outside the urban limits shall be spaced so that no more than 2 shelters are erected per mile of a 2-lane highway. And I hadn't checked, but I think we got some closer than that.
I wanted to ask you just one question before you go on. I see a lot of those shelters actually located in the right-of-way itself, not like they're on somebody's property. Just wanted to...
Yeah, all of them probably are in the right-of-way. This allowed them to be in the right-of-way. See, they couldn't advertise. They used the bus shelter as an end to be able to advertise on the right-of-way. It allowed the bus shelter, and if it was there, then they could advertise on it. So they used that end to get advertising on the right-of-way. But the bus shelters aren't being utilized. So it was, kind of sneaky
I think we can accommodate that.
in what they did. It's got to meet the setback minimum clear recovery zone requirements as established by the Department's Design Standards Index 700. This is one that never has been implemented. The owner of abutting property shall be notified by certified mail of the proposed shelter location if there will be advertising. And that never happens. I know that can be empty because I had one put next to the property I had, and they didn't notify me. I had it moved. I had it removed from the property, from the right-of-way, excuse me. Shelter shall be properly maintained as to aesthetics, function, and safety. So these have existed out there in non-compliance. You might say that they're illegally even out there unless they meet the requirements of Rule 1420, which, I agree with what others have said. I have not seen that to be the case.
Can I see if anybody else wants to speak on, we've got 4:30, we're cutting off. Nobody else is speaking, you can go ahead and...
Okay, I got about 30 seconds, and I'll be finished.
Political signs.
And so to summarize what I'm saying, I think that you'll find that these school bus shelters out there with signs are not in compliance with Florida Administrative Code Rule, Chapter 1420, or even the older county sign regulations. They should be removed from the right-of-way. This will eliminate eyesores, advertising from the right-of-way, eliminate liability, eliminate monitoring, eliminate enforcement, eliminate administrative time required to track them and permit them, and bring the county into compliance with current requirements as the statutes require. So that's my opinions on 1420 and the bus shelters. One off-the-hand comment, you talked about outdoor advertising and billboards. I sat on a beautification committee for a couple years where we worked with outdoor advertising companies, billboard companies, and trying to beautify I-75 in the central part of the state. And I'll just tell you that they're a very powerful and wealthy lobby. So whatever you're going to do with billboards, make sure that you kind of partner with them, whatever requirements you're looking at and everything, to do your legwork up front and make sure you got all your bases covered. In other words, I've told people don't shoot across the bow unless you're ready for the war, that's fixing to proceed. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anybody else in the audience want to speak? Howard, what do you want?
Yes, 2 things. One is on election signs. The other is on the time frame of applying for a permit and execution of that response and the execution of the time of the actual building of the sign. So I'd like to start with the election signs. Let's go back to it quickly. It's on page 13, at least one. And there's a difference between putting an election sign on a piece of residential property size-wise as opposed to a commercial or industrial or one of the others. And so the question is why? And when you look at roads that are a major thoroughfare, the majority of those roads are fronted by businesses. And it seems to give an advantage, at least in that aspect, to any candidate that might be strongly backed by business. So I don't totally understand why that's in there, and can that be eliminated?
Robert, did you catch that?
That's Carly and I were just discussing why it was,
Is there something else while they're thinking about it?
Yeah, the other thing is, and I understand the reason. They say, listen, I applied for a permit, I haven't heard from you in 30 days, and so now my permit's good because you didn't respond in time. I agree, we should be responding in time. But the other end of that, I'm giving them 180 days to start construction on a sign, which seems very excessive. And, I can scratch a little dirt or put in a couple of poles and say I started, and so I'm not real happy with that wording.
The issue about when they start construction?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have anything while they're throwing that one over?
While they are conferring, I think you'll find that throughout the ordinance, the size restrictions in a residential area are generally less than similar type signs in a commercial area, and that is to try to preserve the character and the aesthetic environment of a residential area and minimize the size of signs.
What is the restriction for like a political sign in a residential area?
Well, for an election, you can have a 4.5 square feet per sign and 3 feet in height in residential, and in a commercial area, an election sign can be 32 square feet per sign face and 6 feet in height.
So these standard 4 foot by 4 foot political signs like everybody buys will be outlawed in residential areas?
In residential areas, yes.
Is that how it is now, or is that how it would be?
No, that's how it would be.
Not,
Right now, they're not covered, are they, Louis? Election signs at all addressed
Yeah,
in the existing?
I don't know. I was going to check with Summer on that, if they were covered or not.
The removal of election signs is covered, and I believe those spacing the size requirements for election signs were in the existing on-premise language, and that's what we were just trying to confirm.
Hold on.
on the ground is everybody. I hate just people that probably see politicians up there talking about political signs, but I kind of understand what you're talking about.
Okay, I'm gonna give an example. Say at the Duggar fence, that's actually, I know it's a farm, but it's a residential place, but it'll have 4x4 signs that tied to the fence. So under the new ordinance, would that mean that you couldn't put a 4x4 on a residential?
That's how I would say it.
I would say also.
And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
But I can say one added benefit that a 4x4 sign does do is there's a lot of people who, for sight reasons, are not able to read the little 12 by 18s, and it does allow it better visibility. So.
I assume we're going to come back in a public hearing for this. This was just a workshop.
Yeah.
We'll have another chance to talk to this. And I think that's it. Howard, you meet people? They want to talk to them on private about that answer.
Sure.
I'll see y'all back here in 30 minutes.
Got it.